Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Future Score, our first annual online composition concert that brings together students from Campus International High School with composers and supporters of new music together from throughout the United States. My name is Mr. John Dutton, and I am the MC for tonight's event, sponsored by the Campus International High School Music Department, Matthew Cotton, Director. The program for tonight's concert is available at bit.ly/FutureScore. Mr. Cotton will now share with us the format for tonight's event.
Thanks, Mr. Dutton, and thank you for our audience for being here tonight. Here's how the format will go. We will introduce our student composer and their online mentor. A link to the student's comment page will be introduced into the chat area of Zoom. Feel free to click on the link using the online Padlet platform to leave supportive comments, and congratulations to each student composer. The student's composition will then be played through online video. At this time, we want to take this opportunity to introduce and thank our clinicians tonight. The Campus International High School community thanks you and your attendance and service. And now, back to Mr. Dutton.
Without further ado, let us start our concert. Our first student composer we will be featuring tonight is Jonah Schwab. Jonah is a 10th grade flute player and enrolled in the CIHS band. His composition tonight, Rain Following Sun, is a 40-measure composition for piano. Jonah's mentor is Mr. Nicholas Yandel. Ladies and gentlemen, the premiere of Rain Following Sun by Jonah Schwab. Thank you, Jonah. I will now send Jonah and Mr. Yandel to their breakout room to discuss his composition. Our second student composer that we will be featuring tonight is Yoshiya Brown. Yoshiya is a trumpet player and is our only 9th grade composer being featured tonight. His composition, Beauty with a Hint of Beast, is a trumpet solo with piano accompaniment. Yoshiya's mentor tonight is Mr. Brooke Pearson. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the premiere of Beauty with a Hint of Beast by Yoshiya Brown. Thank you, Yoshiya. Please show your appreciation for Yoshiya's composition. I will now send Mr. Pearson and Yoshiya to the breakout room. Our third composer tonight is Isabella Cron. Isabella is a 10th grader and our co-first chair flautist in band. Her composition, Wishing Upon a Star, is for flute solo and piano accompaniment. Isabella's mentor tonight is Dr. Lisa Crawford. And now, the premiere of Wishing Upon a Star by Isabella Cron. Thank you, Isabella. I will now send Isabella and Dr. Crawford to their breakout room in order to discuss her composition. Our fourth composer we will feature tonight is Vivian Cox. Vivian is a 10th grader at Campus International and is our first chair clarinetist. Vivian's music was selected to participate in the Ohio Music Educators Creative Events Festival, and we are eager to get the feedback from her work. Vivian's piece, Adventure Through Taverns, Forests, and Castles, is a piece for solo clarinet and piano accompaniment. Vivian's mentor tonight is Dr. Cynthia Johnston Turner. And now, the premiere of Adventure Through Taverns, Forests, and Castles by Vivian Cox. Thank you, Vivian. Please show your appreciation for Vivian and her composition. I am now going to send Vivian and Dr. Turner to their breakout room to discuss her composition. Our last composer of the night is Dade Fuller. Dade is an 11th grade double bass player in our orchestra and electric bassist for our school-sponsored modern band, Shibby. Dade has recently been accepted to participate in the 2020 Cleveland Institute of Music's Young Composer Program, which will occur virtually over the summer. He has been commissioned to write a work for solo flute as a part of this program. Additionally, Dade has been selected to submit work to the National Association for Music Education's 2020 Electronic Music Composition Festival and the Ohio Music Educators Creative Events Festival. Many of Dade's compositions are available via SoundCloud, which is linked in his Padlet. Dade's mentor tonight is Mr. Tony Manfredonia. Here is Space Insomnia by Dade Fuller. Thank you, Dade. That is the first piece, Space Insomnia. We will premiere right now Dade's Corona. with that, this is the end of our concert tonight.
Hey everyone, it's June, and that means it's Pride Month. A lot of times, Pride is an opportunity for people in the LGBTQ plus community to declare that we're proud of our community and celebrate the differences and commonalities that make our community strong. This year, Pride is not a parade in June, but it is an opportunity to reflect on our community and how we can be stronger together. There are a lot of things you can do to show solidarity, but one thing that everyone can do, whether you're a member of the LGBTQ community or not, is to take a look at your bookshelf. So your bookshelf could be a physical shelf in your room where you keep your books, right? It could be a digital collection of books that you read on Kindle or your cell phone or a Nook. Or it could just be a list of books that you've checked out from the library. Your shelf could be huge, right? Expansive, full of books, or there might only be a few titles on it. But take a look at it. Whose voices are you hearing? What types of books are you reading? And if you find yourself, through your inventory, in need of some fresh perspectives or just a new title or two to add, I've got some recommendations for you in the spirit of Pride this year. The first book that I'm going to recommend to you is called The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. So here's the description. Michael is a mixed-race gay teen growing up in London. All his life, he's navigated what it means to be Greek Cypriot and Jamaican, but never quite feeling Greek or Black enough. As he gets older, Michael's coming out is only the start of learning who he is and where he fits in. When he discovers the drag society, he finally finds where he belongs, and The Black Flamingo is born. Told with raw honesty, insight, and lyricism, this debut explores the layers of identity that make us who we are and allow us to shine. I'm really interested in this book for a couple of reasons. And the first one is it's written in verse. So if you read Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds or The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, you've read a text in verse, right? In poetry form. These books are really interesting because writers express really complex thoughts and emotions in a smaller number of words. And they also increase the pace of the text. If you read Long Way Down, you were turning the page every 2 seconds trying to find out what happens next, what happens on the next floor. And this book is the same way. You're constantly trying to get to the next page to figure out what happens next, and the suspense keeps building as you read. So if you're looking for a really fast read and a new perspective, check out The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. Another book I highly recommend is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. Juliet Milagros Palante is a self-proclaimed closeted Puerto Rican lesbian from the Bronx. Only she's not so closeted anymore. Not after coming out to her family the night before flying to Portland, Oregon to intern with her favorite feminist writer. What's sure to be a life-changing experience. And when Juliet's coming out crashes and burns, she's not sure if her mom will ever speak to her again. But Juliet has a plan, sort of. Her internship with legendary author Harlow Brisbane, the ultimate authority on feminism, women's bodies, and other gay-sounding stuff, is sure to help her figure out this whole Puerto Rican lesbian thing. Except Harlow's white and not from the Bronx, and she definitely doesn't have all the answers. Juliet Takes a Breath is a really great read, especially if you're looking for a really strong protagonist. If you're one of those people who loves like really well-built characters where you can see inside their head and look at the way they think and the way they function, then Juliet Takes a Breath is a really great choice for you. It also has really great descriptions that are so vivid of the Bronx in New York and also Oregon. And I've never been to Oregon. So reading the descriptions of what she does in Oregon makes it a really quick and interesting read. So I highly recommend this one. Finally, I recommend All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. In a series of personal essays, prominent journalist and LGBTQIA+ activist George M. Johnson explores his childhood, adolescence, and college years in New Jersey and Virginia. From the memories of getting his teeth kicked in by bullies at age 5, to flea marketing with his loving grandmother, this young adult memoir weaves together the trials and triumphs faced by Black queer boys. Both a primer for teens eager to be allies, as well as a reassuring testimony for young queer men of color, All Boys Aren't Blue covers topics such as gender identity, toxic masculinity, brotherhood, family structure, marginalization, and Black joy. Johnson's emotionally frank style of writing will appeal directly to young adults. This book is really cool because it's a memoir. You've probably read memoirs before in school. Memoirs are nonfiction literature that are written and based in the author's own memories. So he's telling you stories from his real life. So if you're looking for a truly authentic voice of someone and their own experiences growing up that you can relate to, or that you can just learn more about this person, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson is a really great choice. All right, so let's say you're really excited about one of these books, or this reminds you that you have a book coming out that you were really excited to read. I want to encourage you to start your own summer book club. So I have some tips for creating your own summer book club so that you can exercise those reading skills over the summer and also be super impressive to your English teacher in the fall. So the first thing you want to do is pick a book. It could be one of the books I've recommended. It could be something that sparks your interest that you see on social media that someone you know or like is reading, or it could just be a book that's been on your list for a while. No matter what you do, pick a book that you're super excited about. I've been known to browse bookstore or library shelves, reading the descriptions just like I would when I'm sitting on my couch trying to pick something on Netflix. It can be really fun to pick a book, but pick one that you're passionate and excited about that you want to binge, right? And then get your friends involved. If you're hype about this book, share that with your friends. You don't need a huge group, but even 1, 2, or 3 more people to read this book with you would make it a really awesome experience. So get your friends involved and get them to commit to reading this book with you. Once you've done that, figure out how you want to meet up safely during COVID-19. So that could be a Zoom, it could be a Google Meet, it could be a FaceTime call, however it is that you want to meet up with your friends, right? Find a way that you guys can talk about this book. Then create a reading and a meeting schedule. That means if you're going to meet once a week, or if you're only going to meet once or twice, how many pages should you have read by the time you meet? I know this sounds a little English teacher-y, right? Read to page 176. But it keeps everybody on track and prevents you from getting spoilers. So if your friend finishes the book in 2 days, you make sure you let them know, hey, we're not talking about anything past 176. Next, while you're reading, you want to actively read, okay? And actively reading shouldn't pull you out of the book. It shouldn't pull you out of what's happening. But if you just have a notebook or a pencil, some sticky notes, something around you while you're reading that you can use to make notes, actively reading helps you remember, oh, this was a really cool scene. I want to talk about this with my friends. Or, oh, I love this quote. I really want to talk about this with my friends. And as you read, just take a sticky note in that page or note down the page number. Please don't dog-ear the pages, just to remind yourself, hey, I was really interested in talking about this. That makes the discussion so much more rich and interesting. Then, when you meet up, decide how you're going to disagree respectfully. We might have very different opinions when we read a book, and especially books on topics that we don't always read about. can bring up lots of emotions or feelings or opinions you didn't even know your friends had. So someone that you normally get along with, you might find yourself disagreeing with. Decide how you're going to do that in a respectful way. How are you going to keep your friendship, right? Even if you have different opinions. And decide how you're going to disagree respectfully. And finally, enjoy your discussion. And when you come back in the fall, just impress the pants off your English teacher, right? They're going to be so excited to hear about all of the awesome and amazing and critical books that you read. All right, I hope you're inspired to start your own book club. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful summer, and let us know what you're reading. Stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Look at this quote. A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. That was said in 1903 by Marcus Garvey, who was a civil rights leader and activist. To understand what is going on in our country today, we have to look back in history to see what has happened before and what has been done about it. In order to do that, I will be taking you through several installments in this summer in which we will talk and learn about human rights. For this installment, we will learn what human rights are and the history behind them. So the first thing I want you to think of is, what is a human right? Take a second. What do you think that is? Don't cheat. Don't Google. What is a human right? You're going to watch this video now, and it is going to focus on the history of human rights.
Human rights is, geez, that's a good question.
Human rights. Oh, that's a tough one.
Wow.
Well, actually, you could.
I don't even know how to give that a definition.
I would probably have to do a little bit of homework or something.
Yeah, any right that I think just as a normal, human, any.
The rights that humans have.
Oh, that's a very large debate.
To mindset. Tú le puedes preguntar a 20 personas y te van a dar 20 diferentes opiniones.
Non saprei, una domanda complicatissima.
We just take them for granted that they're there, but we don't even consider what they are.
Human rights are the rights you have simply because you're human. It's how you instinctively expect and deserve to be treated as a person, like the right to live freely, to speak your mind, and to be treated as an equal. There are many kinds of rights. Most apply to a certain group. But human rights are the only ones that apply to absolutely everyone, everywhere. That means kids, old people, poor people, basketball players, garbage men, rappers, teachers, Africans, Indians, Albanians, Christians, Muslims, Kabbalists, atheists, your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor, and you all have the exact same human rights. In other words, they're universal. But the question remains, what are they?
Name the human rights?
What the human rights are?
The right to live.
Equality between all peoples.
Right to religion, the right to...
Is there supposed to be a list somewhere I should be aware of?
According to the United Nations, there are a total of 30 human rights, which are usually lumped together and called simply human rights. They're all listed out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the world's most widely accepted document on the subject. But it was a long time in coming. At first, there were no human rights. If you were in with the right crowd, you were safe. If you weren't, well, you weren't. But then a guy named Cyrus the Great decided to change all that. After conquering Babylon, he did something completely revolutionary. He announced that all slaves were free to go. He also said people had the freedom to choose their religion, no matter what crowd they were a part of. He documented his words on a clay tablet known as the Cyrus Cylinder. And just like that, human rights were born. The idea spread quickly to Greece, to India, and eventually to Rome. they noticed that people naturally followed certain laws, even if they weren't told to. They called this natural law, but it kept getting trampled on by those in power. Not until 1,000 years later in England did they finally get a king to agree that no one can overrule the rights to people, not even a king. People's rights were finally recognized, and they were now safe from those in power. Kind of. It still took a bunch of British rebels declaring their independence before the king got the point that all men are created equal. Which isn't to say he liked the idea, but he couldn't stop them, and America was born. The French immediately followed with their own revolution for their own rights. Their list was even longer, and they insisted that these rights weren't just made up. They were natural. The Roman concept of natural law had become natural rights. Unfortunately, not everyone was so thrilled. In France, a general named Napoleon decided to overthrow the new French democracy and crown himself emperor of the world. He almost succeeded, but the countries of Europe joined forces and defeated him. Human rights was again a hot topic. They drew up international agreements, broadly granting many rights across Europe, but only across Europe. The rest of the world somehow still didn't qualify. Instead, they got invaded, conquered, and consumed by Europe's massive empires. But then a young lawyer from India decided enough was enough. His name was Mahatma Gandhi, and in the face of violence, he insisted that all people of Earth had rights, not just in Europe. Eventually, even Europeans started to agree. But it wasn't going to be that easy. 2 world wars erupted. Hitler exterminated half the Jewish population of Earth in horrifying Nazi death camps. And all told, 90 million people died. Never had human rights been so terrifyingly close to extinction. And never had the world been more desperate for change. So the countries of Earth banded together and formed the United Nations. Their basic purpose was to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person. What were human rights? Were they the proclamations of Cyrus, the natural laws of Rome, the declarations of France? Everyone seemed to have a slightly different idea of what human rights should be. But under the supervision of Eleanor Roosevelt, they finally agreed on a set of rights that applied to absolutely everyone. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The French concept of natural rights had finally become human rights. So in summary, at first, only a few lucky people had any rights, until one of those guys decided, hey, other people should have some rights too, which was great, except not everyone agreed. And it only took a few thousand years of fighting and declarations and more fighting until everyone finally agreed that human rights should apply to everyone. And they all lived happily ever after. Except for one little problem. If people have the right to food and shelter, why are 16,000 children dying of starvation every day? 1 every 5 seconds. If people have freedom of speech, why are thousands in prison for speaking their minds? If people have the right to education, why are over 1 billion adults unable to read? If slavery has truly been abolished, why are 27 million people still enslaved today? More than twice as many as in 1800. The fact is, when it was signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not have the force of law. It was optional. And despite many more documents, conventions, treaties, and laws, it's still little more than words on a page. So the question is, who will make those words a reality?
I have a dream today.
When Dr. King marched for racial equality, he was marching for rights that had been guaranteed by the United Nations for almost 2 decades. But still, he marched. When Nelson Mandela stood up for social justice in the 1990s, his country had already agreed to abolish such discrimination for almost 40 years. But still, he fought. Those who fight today against torture, poverty, and discrimination are not giants or superheroes. They're people. Kids, mothers, fathers, teachers, free-thinking individuals who refuse to be silent, who realize that human rights are not a history lesson. They're not words on a page. They're not speeches or commercials or PR campaigns. They are the choices we make every day as human beings. They are the responsibility we all share to respect each other, to help each other, to protect those in need. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere.
So now that we've watched the video, I want to review a few important dates that came out of the video. So first they said that anybody had their rights only because of what group you belong to, like your family. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great, he was just a leader and he conquered the city of Babylon. And when he did that, he freed all the slaves and declared also that people could choose their own religion. And this idea was put down on the Cyrus cylinder, and it is the first human rights declaration in history. And then about 500 years later, during the Roman Empire, they realized that people naturally follow some laws, even if they weren't told to follow them. And this idea of natural law, that people just follow some laws because it's what they're wired to do. So this is when they start to figure out like what's going on with people, but the rulers were still, keeping the people down. So 1215 BC or AD, 1215. So we're talking 1200 years later, the Magna Carta comes out of England. And what it does is it limits the power of the king, but it also gives people rights. And so it starts to break up down the whole power of the king. Then 400 years later, also in England, there's the Petition of Right. And this was brought forth by Parliament, again in England. And again, they were trying to limit the rights of the king and give the people more power. So 400 and some years later, the king still thinks that he's all powerful. Then in 1776, the 13 colonies declare themselves independent of England and become the United States. And when they do that, when they declare that independence from England, they proclaimed the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A few short years later, the French also have a revolution, and they are freeing themselves of their king. And they have the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which states that all citizens are equal under the law. And then about 150 years later, after World War II, Eleanor Roosevelt and the United Nations come together and create the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR. And this is the first document that lists the 30 rights to which everyone is entitled. So we have like 2,500 years of history here talking about the rights of people. So what now? Well, what I want you to do is I want you to look back at this timeline look back at the video if you're able to, if you can rewind, if you can't. Hopefully you can pull it up on your phones, on YouTube. You go to CMSD on WUAB and you look for today's date and you can bring up the episode and you can watch it again. And when you do that, I want you to make observations. There were a lot of dates and there was a lot of information in the timeline, in the video. The video is, in essence, a timeline. And I want you to make those observations. But then I also want you to go through and figure out how many documents do they discuss, do they show in this video on this timeline. I only touched on the few big ones, but not on all of them. So hopefully you're able to do that. If not, I just want you to reflect on what you remember, because next week, in next week's installment, we're going to be diving in a little deeper into the UDHR. So I want you to at least have thought a little bit about it. Here I have just some pictures for you. On one side of this slide, I have an infographic of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was put together by Facing History and Ourselves. And it shows all 30 rights, and it just, breaks it down. And on the other side, if that's too busy, too much for you to look at, on the other side, I just have all of the articles listed 1 through 30. If you think about our Bill of Rights here in the United States, that's part of our Constitution. They're Right 1 or Amendment 1, Amendment 2, Amendment 3. But these are called articles. So they're not called rights. They're not called amendments. They're called articles. And each one is the 30 rights. And they make up the UDHR, which again stands for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this is the big takeaway question that I want you to have done in your mind or on paper as we prepare for the next installment of this human rights course. They state in the video that if human rights were guaranteed in the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in 1948, then why are there still violations of those rights going on today? They talk about a few violations that are going on in the world at that time. But there are human rights violations going on right now in June of 2020. And why are there still violations of those rights? Why do you think that is? I want you to prepare for the next installment by writing that response down. If you want to share your response, go online, go to social media, and speak your voice. Make sure you use the hashtag CMSD Student Voice. I hope you learned a little bit about human rights today. Next week's installment, we're going to go diving deeper into these rights and start to explore why they're being violated. Thanks. Ms. Thompson is out.
Hello, SWAG seniors. I'm Eric Gordon, Superintendent CEO of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. Thank you for participating in our SWAG pilot this year. I hope that SWAG helped you learn more about yourself and your strengths and interests as they relate to future employment. Identify career pathways that may have been new to you but offer great opportunities for growth and financial stability. And meet new people and work differently with people you know, students, teachers, coaches, and employers who can support you in achieving your goals. By participating in SWAG, you helped us test a new model that will help future CMSD scholars as they transition from school to the workplace. On behalf of your SWAG teachers and coaches, we are honored to have been part of your high school experience and to see your excitement and promise as you enter the workforce. I wish you the best of luck in your next adventure, whether you plan to work full-time, serve our country as part of the military, or pursue college studies. You will achieve great things. Thanks again for participating in SWAG.
Has your household completed the 2020 census yet? The census is an official count of everybody in this country, And the results of it determine how much federal money goes into programming for the children of Cleveland for the next 10 years. It's completely private and confidential. The results can't be shared with anyone, not even law enforcement. And the best part, it's easy. You can fill out your census online, by phone, or by mail.
¿Su casa ha llenado el censo de 2020? El censo es el conteo oficial de todas las personas en el país y los resultados determinan cuántos fondos federales se distribuyen en programas que benefician a todos los niños de nuestra región para los próximos 10 años. Toda la información es privada. Las respuestas son confidenciales y no pueden ser compartidas con nadie, ni siquiera oficiales de la ley. Y mejor que todo, es fácil. Puede responder por internet, por teléfono o por correo.
So who counts?
Entonces, ¿quién cuenta?
Does my cat count?
¿Los gatos cuentan?
No.
No.
Do my dogs count?
¿Los perros cuentan?
No.
No.
Does he count?
¿Los niños cuentan?
Yes.
Sí.
Everybody that's a human in your house counts.
Cada persona que es ser humano en tu casa cuenta.
So to fill out your census, go to www.my2020census.gov or call 1-844-330-2020.
Para llenar el censo, pueden ir al www.my2020census.gov o llama al 844-330-2020.
Don't forget, you count.
Y no olvides, tú cuentas.